السلام عليكم دكتورة. Sorry, I stopped the slides. Just give me a second. Let me introduce you, and then you can share your slide.
Okay, doctor.
4 minutes, give us 4 minutes. We'll start 5 sharply. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody from different university, different countries, different language from different countries. So thank you so much for joining us today in a new topic. This is me, Dr. Ahmed Al-Gattan, the founder of ITAR Group. Today we have another or a new keynote speaker, which is Dr. Rasha Mahboub, is an assistant professor of accounting at Beirut Arab University. Her primary research interests are in the field of voluntary disclosure, impression management, forward-looking information disclosure, financial reporting quality, impact of information and communication technology, and social media on performance of banking sector. Dr. Mahboub taught various undergrad and graduate business classes, published 2 textbooks and some research paper in peer-reviewed international academic journals. She won Sharjah Prize for a Best PhD dissertation, Administrative Science. Most welcome, Dr. Rasha, and thank you for accepting my invitation. Dr. Rasha, you have 45 to 1 hour for your presentation, then we'll open the floor for any of the audience question.
Okay.
The audience have 2 types to ask your question. You can write or type your question in Q&A below the screen, or you can raise your hand and we'll go one by one to ask our keynote speaker your question. Thank you so much, Dr. Rasha, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Ahmed. Good evening, professors, doctors, ladies, and gentlemen. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ahmed once again for inviting me to this webinar and for giving me the opportunity to talk about an interesting topic in accounting, which is impression management in annual reports of MENA region banks. Actually, the presentation will be divided into 3 main parts. The first one, it's about the background. The second part, it's about impression management. And the last part, it's about impression management in MENA region banks. Now, let's start with part 1, which is background. The Asian economic crisis took place in year 1997, along the breakdown of many accounting scandals as companies in Enron, Paramalat, and many others in year 2011 have placed accounting and auditing profession under inspection and have shaken not only trust in financial reporting, but also into the financial system on the whole. As a result of these scandals and these crises, investors, academicians, regulators, and other stakeholders asked for higher transparency from the business world. This transparency has been translated by better and more comprehensive information disclosure through diverse media, for example, press release, corporate websites, and annual reports. Although there are a wide variety of media of information disclosure, however, annual reports is considered the most important channel of information disclosure, and at the same time, it is the most significant communication tools for various user groups. In fact, the annual report of any company may contain quantitative information, accounting narratives, financial graphs, photographs, and tables. And most importantly, that The annual report is divided into two sections. We have the quantitative section and we have the narrative section. With respect to the quantitative section, the section consists of the financial statements and the notes related to them. You have to know something, that in this section, the format and the content in this section is governed by law and regulation. They are regulated, and at the same time, they are audited. Independent auditor has to confirm that whether the financial statement provide a real and honest view of the organization results. However, the second part, which is the narrative section, is unregulated. There's no any laws or regulation governed for this part. And also, the narrative section is not subject to audit requirement. There's no auditor audit this section. Because of these reasons, the information in this section is at the discretion of the management. What do you mean by discretion of the management? Means that the manager has the freedom to write whatever he wants in this section. Consequently, organizations have a great, as I said, great extent of freedom to demonstrate this performance in this section, because in this section, there is no regulation, there is no law, it's not audited. So firms usually tend to provide additional information in this section in an attempt to convey their own side of the story. So usually they attempt to convey their own side of the story on matters and issues of public concern. So when a company is doing so, the company may impact reader impression by manipulating the content, the managing the presentation of the information. Therefore, the section, which is the narrative section, offers the management with an outstanding opportunity to clarify events their own welfare. Moreover, management in this section usually appear to emphasize the positive news. What about the negative news? The negative news usually is hidden or is excluded. Why? Strengthen the corporate reputation of the organization. This selective way of presenting the information, we select only to emphasize the positive information, and we go to hide or exclude the negative information. It may be seen as a part of impression management. Although impression management is a wealthy phenomenon, it has a negative influence on shareholders, on stakeholders, and on society. Also, impression management, although the significance of this phenomenon, impression management is still quite fresh in accounting literature. Most important that the dearth of research in this area is even more evident in the case of MENA region or MENA countries. Consequently, research to convey insight regarding this spring of research, specifically in MENA countries, is needed. Now, let's talk about part 2, which is the impression management. What do we mean by impression management? First of all, the impression management has its origin in social psychology. So I will start by presenting impression management, the social psychological basics. Many individuals are concerned with making well and satisfied impressions on others, since they think that these impressions will make lasting influence. And also, during interaction, persons usually seek to control their image, either intentionally or unintentionally. When a person tries or seeks to control the image or his image, either intentionally or unintentionally, this is called impression management. I will give you an example here. Suppose we have a fresh graduate, and this fresh graduate will have, for example, a job interview. He needs to go to the job interview. He will wear formal clothes, for example. Although usually wearing casual, he will not wear casual. He will wear, for example, formal clothes. This fresh graduate, for example, is very nervous. When he's going to the interview, he will try his best to look at an image very beautiful, very advantage for the interviewer. So when these fresh graduates try to control the image, to put image for himself, it's not the reality. This part or this action, we can call it an impression management. So it's a social, it has psychological basic. So impression management has its roots in social psychology. And initially, it emphasized on the behavior of the individual, how the individual behave in order to control his image, to give image positive about the individual. Goffman in 1959 is one of the primary researchers who explained impression management. Goffman, in his opinion, he called impression management as a strategic self-presentation. He called impression management as self-presentation. How I make a presentation for myself in an advantageous view, in a beneficial view. So according to Goffman, impression management in psychological basic, it comprises controlling or altering the perceptions that others have of the individual. What about accounting? I said for us that impression management, it has roots in psychology. What about accounting? Although impression management has its roots in social psychology, however, research evidence advocates that impression management has its role in accounting. What do you mean by impression management in accounting? In accounting or in corporate reporting context, impression management is a manipulation of information to depict a specific image, and it is generally aimed at developing a more advantageous view of an organization performance than is warranted. So the impression management in accounting, it's a type of manipulation of information. Why? Develop a more advantageous image about the company than is warranted. Where impression management can occur? Impression management usually managers use the annual reports as impression management tools to manipulate the perception and decision of stakeholders. Most specifically, where in the annual reports? Is it in the quantitative section or in the narrative section? Of course, the answer is in the narrative section. Why? Because the narrative section is not audited, is not regulated. So as a manager, I can write whatever the information I need in this section. There's no regulations, there is no law, there's no auditing for this section. Thus, you have to know something very important, that impression management conflicts with the purpose of accounting. All of us know what is the purpose of accounting. The purpose of the accounting is to display objectively financial performance in a neutral, unbiased way. Forms of impression management. Impression management in the annual reports and in the chairman letter or in the narrative section of the annual reports, it can take several forms. The manipulation can be occurred in the graphs, it can be occurred in the pictures in the annual reports, in the tables, or in the accounting narratives. Although there are several types or several forms of impression management, however, the narrative section or the accounting narrative, it is the most important part of the impression management. When we are talking about impression management or the accounting narrative, it is the most important part of the impression management. Actually, we have 7 strategies in the narrative section. They are reading ease manipulation, they are rhetorical manipulation, they are thematic manipulation, they are visual and structural manipulation, they are performance comparison, they are choice of earnings number, and last, attribution of performance. And now we will talk about each one in detail. First impression management strategy is reading ease manipulation. So I will repeat, as I said, the annual reports of any bank, of any company, consist of 2 sections, the narrative section and the financial statement section, or we call it the quantitative section. In the impression management, we focus on the narrative section, as I said, because this section is not regulated, is not audited. So The manager can write the information they need. Managers can write the information they need in this section. So in doing this, they are performing impression management. In order to perform impression management, as I said, we have 7 strategies. One of these strategies is reading is manipulation. What do you mean by readability? Readability is what makes some text easier to read than other, or in another word, it's the ease of understanding or comprehension due to style of writing. So when we are writing the narrative section of the annual report, organizations should use plain language, should use well-defined terms, should use consistent terminology, should use easy to follow structure. However, previous studies demonstrated that the annual reports mainly are difficult or very difficult to read. So when they are writing the chairman letter in the narrative section in a way that's difficult or very difficult to read, this is one type of impression management. It is the reading is manipulation. They are manipulating us by making the language difficult or very difficult to read. In this way, this writing technique, it may obscure the intended message or confuse the reader or distract or perplexes the reader, leaving him bewildered or muddled. So this indicates that management distort the decision and perception of annual report readers in a manner that make more difficult to read. They make the language more difficult to read, so the user can read, but they don't understand anything. They leave the users bewildered or muddled. This is the first type of impression management. They can manipulate by using difficult language. Second type is rhetorical manipulation. Rhetorical as an impression management strategy is the art of persuasive discourse or the flow of argument to influence the reader in favor of particular perspective. In another way, they are using persuasive language in order to convince or obscure or alter the attention of the reader. They usually try to use some language as a persuasive. They are trying to convince or alter the perception of the reader about the information that I have present. And usually, when they are using rhetorical, they are using the passive verb. They are not using the active verb. Usually they are using the passive verb. So when I see there are several passive verbs in this narrative section, this means the manager are making impression management by rhetorical manipulation, because when they are using passive verb, it has emphasized not on what is said, but how it has been said. Third strategy is about thematic manipulation. This strategy is emphasized on the positive words. It presumes that every manager utilizing this strategy is seeking to hide the bad news, either by not reporting it or reporting it to a lesser extent so that it's concealed by the overemphasized good news. In other words, the third strategy, it is the thematic manipulation. They are writing the narrative section and only they are writing the positive news. Every positive news they are writing. What about the negative news or the bad news? They are not writing it anymore, or they are writing it and to a lesser extent. For example, if I write a chairman letter in the narrative section, and the chairman letter, for example, is 15 lines, maybe they are writing 15 lines about the positive news, and they are not mention anything about the negative news. Or they are writing, for example, 13 lines, the first 13 lines about positive news, and the last 2 or 3 lines about negative news. So in this case, they are making impression management by applying thematic manipulation. So when they are trying to emphasize the positive news and hide the bad news, this is a situation we designated it as Diana principle. The fourth strategy of impression management, it's called visual and structural manipulation. The visual and the structural manipulation involve the manipulation or the visual effect. They are using diversity of visual effect in order to make certain information more attractive to the reader. For example, if the company, for example, achieved a profit of $1 million, in order to make impression management, I can highlight this sentence. I can repeat it more once. I can make it, for example, if the letter in black, I can write it in bold. I can write it in a line more than the another lines. I can repeat it several times. I can make it, for example, red in color. So here, the manipulation and the visual effect. I can use color. I can make repetition for the same information. I can put it in bold. I can make it. I can bigger the size of the size of the font. I can make use bullet points. In this way, I attract the reader for certain information I need the reader to look at. The fifth impression management strategy, it is the performance comparison. Here, the performance comparison comprises selecting benchmarks that are related to the good performance. And here, we are using there are positive bias. Why? In this strategy, for example, I will give you an example. For example, if the assets of the company has been increased from the previous year, they are disclosing about it. It said that our assets has been increased 10%, for example. For example, if the net income decreased, or for example, the earning per share decreased, they are not disclose this information. Only they show the information or talk about indicators that show increase from the previous year. Or there's another type of impression management using performance comparison. For example, if they want to talk about the assets, and in the previous years or this year, the assets shown decrease, they will go a year before the previous year. They select a year that show increase this year about assets, and they are comparing the assets by this year. And this is what we call impression management, by applying impression management by specific strategy, which is called performance comparisons. The sixth one of the impression management strategies, it's about choice of earnings number. This strategy involves the choice of performance number or earnings related number. Here, companies may particularly select certain earnings number and skipping others record their performance more favorably. I will give you an example. As you know that if we can go to the income statement, we can see there are several figures for the income. For example, we have income before income tax, we have income for the year, we have income attributable for the equity holder, for example. So we have several figures for the income. In order to make impression management, they are selecting the highest number of income. The highest number of income, and they are disclosing about it. And they said that we are achieving an income of the amount. So they are selecting the highest amount among several amounts of the income from the income statements. So this amount or the earning number that they are choosing is to produce the highest number. Why? In order to show more profitability than had actually been realized, and thus they impact the perception of the users about the performance of the company. And the last one, it's about the performance attribution. Here it is the process a firm clarify the reason or causes for its performance. Usually in the performance attribution strategy, management assigning positive results to internal factor and because to engage in self-enhancement and justify negative results to external factor, hence give excuse for negative performance. I will explain it more. The performance attribution, if the company has negative results, they are said that the negative results has been achieved because of the external environment. They are blaming others about the negative results. For example, they can say because of COVID-19, because of the war in Syria, so they are trying to give excuse about the negative performance by attributing the results to external factors. And vice versa. If we have positive results, they are assigning the positive results for the internal factor. For example, they can say the positive results because we have clear goals and objectives. We have an identified strategy. So they are assigning the positive results to internal factor in order to have self-enhancement. And now, part 3, it's impression management in MENA region banks. We talk about impression management in general, how it starts in the social psychology, and how it can be applied in accounting, and the strategies in the annual report. Now we will talk about impression management in MENA region banks. Research is prepared by me about the impression management strategies in the MENA region bank. I take 5 countries as a sample from the MENA region. I take Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. And we take the banking sector or the major banks in these countries, and we make download for the annual reports for each bank, and we take the chairman letter, which is a part of the narrative section from the annual reports, in order to know if the banking sector in MENA region apply impression management strategies or not. The results indicated that, as I said, we have 7 strategies. The result of the research indicated that 4 out of 7 narrative strategies they are exist in the banking sector of MENA countries. They are the reading ease manipulation, they are visual and structural manipulation, they are the performance comparison, and performance attribution. More specifically, the results indicated that the banks in MENA region, they are using very difficult to read language in the chairman letter. Also, they are placing the good news in the most emphasized sections. They are using the whole chairman letter for the good news, and if we have bad news, they are putting or writing it down. And also, they are selecting a previous period comparative benchmark performance indicators. They are selecting just the indicator that shown increase from previous years. And the last impression management strategies, as I said, it is the performance attribution. They are attributing the responsibility of positive news to internal factors and the negative news to external factors. After we analyze the results of the research, we come with a recommendation. How can we overcome the impression management strategies? For the first one, which is the reading ease manipulation, how can we ensure that the annual report has not been involved in impression management or reading ease manipulation? One of the recommendations is the preparer must seriously improve the readability of the chairman letter. How can we improve the readability level? By measuring the readability level. What do you mean by measuring the readability level? I have, when I write the chairman letter, I have to measure the readability. This part, it's easy, it's difficult, it's very difficult. You will ask me, how can I know that it's difficult, it's very difficult, it's easy, it's very easy? I will tell you after a while, how can we know if a certain piece of writing it's easy or not easy, or difficult or very difficult? So we recommend for the chairman letter, measure the readability level of the chairman letter before we publishing it. What about rhetorical manipulation? In order to overcome rhetorical manipulation, we recommend against using the passive voice. As I said, when we're using the passive verb, this means we are using the rhetorical manipulation. So we recommend against using the passive voice as much as we can. What about the thematic manipulation? As I said, the thematic manipulation just to provide the positive news and to hide or to disclose to a lesser extent the negative news. How can we overcome this strategy? We can overcome it by putting our piece of paper and make sentiment analysis. The sentiment analysis can tell us if our paper or if our piece of writing is positive, negative, or neutral. About visual and structural manipulation, we recommend not use any bullets, any color in the annual, in the chairman letter, and bring the positive news and the negative news at the same time in the annual report. What about performance comparisons? Also, we recommend to choose 4 performance indicators, which is the net profit, the assets, the lending, and the deposits. Usually, we have to disclose about them, either if they are changing increase or changing decrease. What about the choice of earning number? We recommend that you disclose only about the net profit from the income statement without disclosing any another type of profits. What about the performance attribution? We recommend against the use of first person pronoun. Don't use I, we, he, she in the chairman letter, because they don't need to assign or to blame us ourselves or others about the performance of the company. After all the results of the impression management strategy in MENA Regional Bank, we can come to a major recommendation about how we can overcome all these impression management strategies. The researcher, which is me, recommends regulator for more actively intervening to ensure the first one, standardization of the narrative section. We recommend the regulator to make standardization for the narrative section, because as I said, the manager can write it in a way he wants. So we recommend the standardization of the narrative section in the annual reports. And the most important thing, we recommend the possible audit of these sections. And now we have an important question. Usually students ask to me, how can we measure the existence of the impression management strategy in the annual reports of banks? How can I know we have impression management or not? Now I will answer you. In order to know if we have reading is manipulation, the task is very simple. We can use Microsoft Office Word. This program will give us if we have reading is manipulation strategy or not. How? We have something we call it flash reading is. The flash reading is, it's an indicator about what is that, if the piece of writing is written in a difficult language, in a very difficult language, and an easy language. So we have to calculate it. How can we calculate the flash? We can calculate it, or we can bring it from the Microsoft Office Word. Here I put for you tips. How can you use the Word in order to get the flash? First of all, you can click on the round button at the top left and click on Word option. And then you can go to the proofing. And then I put a red circle. You can click show readability statistics, and you can copy and paste the piece of writing you need, and then this box will appear in the Word. It's readability. We need the flash reading is. The flash reading is, in this example, it's 82.9. So what do we mean the flash reading is 82.9 for our piece of writing? We have this reading is rating. So we have from 0 to 30, it means our writing is very difficult, or our language is very difficult. If it's between 30 and 50, it's difficult. If it's between 70 and 80, it's fairly easy. So in this example, it's 82.9 means that this piece of writing is an easy. So you have to know that the higher the scale, the easier to read. Whereas the lower the point scale, the greater the reading difficulty. Of course, we have aim of a score of at least 70. In this way, we can discover if we have reading is manipulation or not. What about rhetorical manipulation? We can identify if we have rhetorical manipulation by seeing the number of passive sentences according to the total sentences. So Maybe someone asked me, how can I know the passive sentences? Also, I will tell you that, or will inform you that we can know the number of passive sentences or the passive verbs from the word. Here I put for you steps. You can use the Microsoft Office Word in order to get the number of passive sentences. So we can put the passive sentences to the total sentences of our paragraph, and we get results. You have to know that our aim is to achieve a nil percentage of passive sentences. Why? Because the passive sentences, it is the prime barrier of a clear, concise language, and it destroys the effective communication. However, a percentage of passive sentences that's less than or equal 10% is reasonable. What about thematic manipulation? How can I know that if our paper is include good news or neutral news or bad news? We have sentiment analyzer. It's a software. The software, we can copy paste it our piece of writing, and the text will inform us that if our text it has positive or a positive feeling or negative feeling. So they calculate for us a score, and once the score has been calculated, we can see, for example, if the score is between 10 and 5, this means our text is positive. For example, if the score is between -80 and -100, this means that our piece of writing is very negative. What about visual and structural manipulation? It's an easy one. We can look at the location, we can look at the repetition, we can look at the visual, and we can look at the reinforcement. For the visual, we can look if we have bold, if we have italic, if we have color, if we have underline. This means it's one type of visual and structural manipulation. Also, we can see if a number of sentences, certain number of sentences is repeated more than once. The location of information. Also, it's type of visual and structural manipulation. And also, we can see if we have reinforcements. What do you mean by reinforcements? Reinforcements is the percentage of keywords that have a qualifier. And for example, we can say that we achieve an outstanding growth. Outstanding means qualifier, yani qualifier words. We are exaggerate, we are making reinforcements, and this is visual and structural manipulation. What about performance comparison? Here we can see or we can compare between the indicator that show increase from the previous year and the indicator that show decrease from the previous years. Of course, if the number of indicators that show increase from the previous year exceed the one that show decrease, of course, the company has applying performance comparison. And what's about choice of earning number? Of course, if the company are disclosing, for example, profit before tax in the chairman letter, or disclosing profit attributable to equity holder, and is not disclose the net profit for the year, this means that the company is applying choice of earning number. What about performance attribution? If the annual report or the chairman letter use self-referring pronoun and other referring pronoun, so this means that they are making impression management by performance attribution. Also, we have the software, its name is Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count Package. This software can identify self-referring pronoun and other referring pronoun for any text. Thank you for your valuable time, and I'm ready for any question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rasha, for the informative and very useful presentation. Thank you so much. Before we start, please, guys, if you have any question, please raise your hand, or you can write your question in the Q&A. Doctor, I just have a couple of questions, starting with the sample that you choose different countries, and in GCC you choose just 2 countries, which is I think Emirates and Saudi Arabia. So why didn't choose all the GCC countries? Why you just select just those countries?
Okay, actually, this research that I chose a sample of 5 countries, it is my PhD thesis. And the sample I take several years, and I just concentrate on these countries, and maybe the annual reports in these countries, it's available and they are published in the annual reports. I exclude certain countries because there are some countries the annual report is still in the Arabic language, and some countries the annual reports they are in French language, example. So I choose these countries because the annual reports is easily accessed for these countries.
What about Kuwait, Qatar, for example, Bahrain? What I know, Bahrain, one of the very clear disclosures in all their annual report.
I just make the sample just for 5 countries.
All right, and
I
also,
exclude the others.
I see. Also, but you need to justify why you choose them to avoid bias. Also, do you include any theories in your paper?
Of course, there are several series, but because of the time and because of our students, I don't need to put much information for them.
Which theories did you choose?
We have several series, but the most important one is the agency theory. It's linked to the impression management and the relation, as you know, between the agents, and all of us know the many problems that happened in the impression management between the managers and the owners, and etc.
Of course. Also, have you analyzed your data or not yet? Because we didn't see any.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. This research is already published and the thesis already has been finished. Yes, of course. We use SPSS version 21 and we make analysis for the data. The sample is about 20 annual reports. We choose 20 annual reports for 4 years.
Great. Also, we have a question from Mohammed Al-Ahmed. How to measure impression? How did you measure impression?
Ahmad, as I said, the impression management, we have impression management strategies. And each strategy, we can measure it in a different way. As I answer in the question, I said each strategy, how can we measure it? If I want to give you an example, for example, about reading ease manipulation. As I said for you, you have to calculate the flash reading ease. And once you calculate the amount, you have to compare it with the fresh reading ease scores. And according to the results you obtained, you can know if your language is difficult or very difficult, easy or very easy. If the language, for example, is easy or neutral or very easy, this means there is no impression management or there is no reading ease manipulation. However, if the letter or the piece of writing or the flash reading is for this part is difficult to read or is very difficult to read, this means that we have impression management strategy, which is the first strategy, reading ease manipulation.
Thank you. Anyone from the audience have any question? Please, if you have, you can raise your hand or you can type your question in Q&A. Muhammad asked, but readability doesn't reflect impression.
No, it reflects, as I explained, reading ease manipulation. It's one of the impression management strategies in the narrative section.
Dr. Mohammed, how are you doing? I just noticed from your picture. How are you doing?
Hi, Dr. Ahmed. How are you? All good?
Thank you. So, Dr. Rasha, this is Dr. Mohammed who is asking. So
you're welcome. You're welcome, Dr. Mohammed.
Go ahead, Dr. Mohammed.
Hello?
Hello.
I'm listening, Dr. Mohammed.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we also can hear you.
Yeah, I have just a question. Basically, when you speak about readability.
Yes.
Readability, I believe it doesn't reflect like impression, because this is one thing and the readability is one thing and impression is another thing. So when you say about text, is it readable or not? So that means maybe 12 years guy, he could read it, but we don't know about the impression. We still not yet able to measure the impression of the text. Here, if we measure the readability is just like there's a lot of like fog index, like Flash, which you have used, and its old methods have been used to measure the narrative disclosure of text. And even if it has several disadvantages in accounting and finance, because, for example, if you say like a text is readable from annual report, but it's got like professional phrases like or shortcut, like you say it's investment in readability measurement, it will be considered like a hard word and it's unreadable. But in business word, it's just like normal word. When you speak about investment, when you speak about loan, when you speak about lending, so I'm just like not sure if you measure really impression, because impression is different thing, is not like related to readability. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Muhammad. Let's explain for you something. As I said, impression management, it can take many forms. If we talk about impression management in the accounting narrative, or more specifically in the chairman letter, in the annual report, or in the narrative section of the annual reports, we have 7 strategies. Reading ease manipulation, or readability, as you said, it's one strategy. The main idea here, the Flash, as you said, we have several measures. We can use them in order to measure the readability of the piece of writing or the chairman letter. However, the most important one, or the most used one, the most famous one, it is the Flash reading ease. The idea here, usually the manager, when he writes the chairman letter, if he uses it in a language that is difficult or that's very difficult, here they have something, let me say they have something to hide it. Otherwise, you can write it in a language easy or in language simple, so anyone who read it can understand it. That is impression management, what we call. It's a type of manipulation in the presentation of the information. They need to manipulate, they need to distort, to make distraction for the readers. Maybe the information.
I know, but just sorry to interrupt, but impression is different thing. Impression is about feelings, about sentiments. It's not about readability. And one more thing, Flash is not the most modern thing. I think there's a fog and POC index. They are more new and more advanced to measure readability. Yeah. Thank you so much for your nice presentation. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for arranging this seminars. It's very useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for you. I want to reply, Dr. Ahmed. As Dr. Muhammad said, and as I said, we have several measures to measure the readability. As I said, there are several methods or several rules. However, the Flash, it is the most used one. They are quick and we can get us the answers we need. Readability, it's not the impression management alone. It's one type, it's one strategy from the impression management. We can hide the news we want by using very difficult language. So investor, and as you know that investor usually they are dependent on the narrative section and on the chairman letter to make the decision. Usually, as the previous literature indicated, that investor, they are not looking under the financial statement sections because this section it's too long and they are complicated. So they can go to the narrative section. It is simple for him, and it can take the decision based on him. Because of this, the investor can take his decision based on the information available in the chairman letter. They can use impression management, as you said, by several forms and by several strategies. However, one of these strategies is by manipulating in the language. If I use very difficult language, So I make impression management. I hide information. I make the reader reads, but doesn't understand anything.
Thank you. Anyone had any question? Sarah Khalid, I would be impressed to read your paper, Dr. Rasha, if you could kindly provide me any link to access. Thank you, Sarah Khalid.
And it was a pleasure, Akid, of course. I can provide anything for any student, for any participant.
Thank you. Any others? Anyone have any question? أي حد عنده أي سؤال in Arabic or in English, that's fine. Dr. Rasha, we have a question. What is the title of your paper, of your published paper, please?
Okay, I can provide for you.
Is it a paper or thesis, Dr. Rasha?
Sorry, doctor?
Is it a paper or thesis? Did you publish a thesis or a paper?
Okay, let me tell you. Actually, impression management, it is the main topic of my thesis, my PhD thesis. However, from the thesis, I provide two research papers from the thesis, and at the same time, this thesis, as you said, I won Sharjah Award for the best doctoral dissertation in this thesis, and also at the same time, this thesis has been published a book. It makes a book and published in 8 different languages.
All right, that's good. But did you, as you said, did you publish this paper? If you publish it,
yes, I published this paper. I can provide you now the name.
All right, if you can, so we can put it in the link in the chat so everyone can read it.
Okay.
Mariam Barakchito, she said, excellent presentation, Dr. Rasha, and we have also many messages. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you so much. Anyone have any other question?
I can provide the name of the paper.
Sure.
Impression management, chairman's letters, an empirical study of banks' annual reports, MENA region. This paper has been published in Corporate Board Wall in year 2016, volume 12.
If you, to make it easier, do you have the link or the title? Anything. If you can provide the link or the title, so you can write in the chat and everyone can.
I can write it in the chat, doctor.
Yes, you can. Fadi Haider also want to thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Fadi. Thank you, Badr Huda. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. Yara, thank you. All right. So this is.
It's available in Google. Available.
This is the title. It's published in 2016, you said?
Yes.
All right. By Mahbub. Any other questions? Anyone have any question? All right, you can always keep your eye on those accounts so you can see what is the next webinar for next week. I want to take the opportunity to thank our keynote speaker, Dr. Rasha Mahbub, for your time and effort. Really, you teach us something, and we learned something from today's lecture. It was really useful and benefits for all of us. Also, I want to thank all the audience for joining us today in Zoom and also on YouTube. Thank you so much. As I said, I type all the accounts, the ITAR account, so you can join all of those. The Instagram account is for fund and also for scholarship. If you are interested, you can join or contact me. The next webinar for next week will be Dr. Anud Benhani from Emirates, with the title of COVID-19 related analysis and fake news. Inshallah will be next week, and I will announce the webinar today or tomorrow in all those accounts that I shared in the chat. Again, I want to thank you everybody who is joining us today, and special thanks to Dr. Rasha Mahbub for today's lecture. I hope I hope, Dr. Rasha, this won't be the first time only. Will be a series of other webinars.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Any last word, Dr. Rasha, before we end today?
Just I want to thank you all, and special thanks for you, Dr. Ahmed. Once again, I want to thank you so much for this webinar. I'm so proud to be with you, Dr. Ahmed.
You are most welcome, Dr. Rasha. Thank you so much, guys, and see you next week. Salam.